Alright, that Nyamle Jabala Tangbo, Tangazuki, Laming, the Kishu Juda Tempa Chita, and the Loming Kishu Sumda Tempa, and the J Sumnam, Jingala Soba, Dus Tempa Chukuri, Sashi, Takazanga Durim, Loming Kishu, Losuru Nepada, Jig, and the Namji Lengi, Navachi, Sheriff the Yopa, and Dunya Tumba Yoba Chukuri, on those Sinem, Gures, and in Manga to Dikor that Chikuch. Losuru Nebasiata and Namji killing the Bishop Siata, Dunya Tumbasiata, Kazan Dikorma, no Shurua.
Good morning. So we're continuing to look at the chapter that presents the characteristics that both a teacher of the Dharma and a student of the Dharma require in order to be a fully qualified teacher or student. So last night we went through the three characteristics of a student in some detail. The first being impartiality, the second being intelligence, and the third being enthusiastic. And we looked at the meaning of these and their great purpose, then the need that one has for them. And in addition to looking at the three characteristics that a student requires, we also briefly looked at the faults that would follow if they were absent.
Any Gunji, some no choti pa dorje, and they give you cho yundin, you give you cho some of the parts to more pony going to Pertaya, Yanuba Cherataje, and do Chen and Yamnejoate, Yamnejeta in the Sungoro, Dine down to get Kazam, Lo Suru Nebach Kugores, Chizan Lo Surumi, Lo Chosoluma, and Lo Chosoluma, the Guendes, Chizan Dipap, Dorje Mevasue, Bang, and Nijike, Lo Suru Nebach Jangores, and Jige. Lenny number she machine by Jackari, she dichoso lodi by dichoso Joshua and the Anguies, the exam and Yaudu, the Leniki, and the number Chivashiva school years. On Anjik Dunya, you do remember Lelo said Chumba, Lelo said down to Guineas, so that in is a Lelo the part Dorje, don't you do much school years. So that in is a down to give same that in the Kivu Chumela Mirimba. Kivu Chumuda, Tumo Lamirimba, Tinda Tumo Lamirimba, that Kivu Chimbo, the Tumo Lami, Kivu Chimbi Lamirimba, Yamlin Chevala, Danganzuki, Dangbo, Denige, Samlor Masona, and Kivi Shin, Dienje, Lama Chitan, Lobsang Dorje, Deni Dangbo, and Samlo Denishi, Masala Mason, Manshil Masona, to Kampala Mason, Zidin Yapchirobada, on Dina Shin did the Samlodi, Dangbo Denishi Kugure, that's our Samlotana, the Dangbo Denis, some Dangures, the Kugures, teaching on together, Yamle Chapel, Samlo Denishi Yoba, the answer to Risha Ure, Urvada.
To briefly recap these three indispensable qualities. The first is being impartial, and we looked at the meaning of the word both of being impartial as well as being biased. So there we saw that if one is biased, one's mind has fallen from virtue towards the afflictions, because a mind that is partial or biased is drawn by attachment to what it likes, what it agrees with, particular views, people, traditions, and so forth. So therefore, this is contrary to the purpose of the Dharma, because the purpose of the Dharma is for the student to be trained in which minds are virtuous and therefore lead to happiness, and how to cultivate them. But if one has a biased attitude, one's mind will be closed, and one will rather be strengthening one's afflictions. And this is contrary to the purpose of the Dharma. The second characteristic of intelligence, this is about thinking for oneself, hearing teachings, reflecting on the meaning, analyzing, is this teaching correct? Is what's being presented in accordance with the Buddha Dharma or not? So is the explanation correct or mistaken? The third characteristic that is required is one of enthusiasm. This is to counteract laziness. Laziness which all too easily produces excuses which may well deceive us. Enthusiasm enables us to overcome such excuses and apply ourselves to the trainings. We, right now, in this chapter that we're in, we are establishing the very foundation of our spiritual training. Because in order to identify and then cultivate, become habituated to wholesome minds, and identify and eradicate our habituation to unwholesome minds, we need to train in accordance with a specific sequence. We need to train first in the trainings associated with the being of initial capacity, and then we need to train in with the practices of a being of intermediate capacity. And in that way, we'll have the required foundation to engage in the trainings for a being of supreme capacity. But in order to become both knowledgeable and skilled in all these practices, one needs to rely on a spiritual teacher. And not just any spiritual teacher, a qualified, a genuine spiritual teacher. Hence, we initially looked at the 10 characteristics of a teacher. But in order to be able to have a relationship that enables one to flourish in the Dharma, one as the student also needs characteristics because of the interdependent relationship between student and teacher. It cannot all be done from the teacher's side, no matter how qualified. There is an interdependent relationship. So therefore, we are now in this chapter establishing the foundation of our spiritual training.
That in my motivation, Deternas and that Jeremichi, Sungoro, Galia, and then he kitchen in the Kugure, so somebody, Denina, Deterna, Chela Dunye Chawa, Nyembetse, Yileper Deba, Chedan, Chemo, La Guba Chimbo, and Joba, and then Yeshe Durne, Leshe Zimba de Shiwas.
Returning to the text where we concluded last night. So in the handout, we're at the top of page 41. In the published book, we're on page 36. That being so, we can categorize this into 4. Strong interest in the Dharma, a fully attentive or focused mind while listening. Thirdly, great respect for the Dharma and the expounder of the Dharma. And fourthly, holding to good explanations and rejecting faulty ones.
That Bendigo Lama Jumsen Denitino Koba Inza, that Anigarsene, that Dondala, Shola Donye was Kuries, Chia Jelia, Jet Bed, Jela, Donye Yamlen Chia, that did Jaya, Donye Dumbash, Dumba Yapush Kuries, Donye Chawas, that Donye, there's your about the mind, but there's Donye Shukchimborash, Donye Shukchimbosh Kuries. Denezada, Nyembe, Yi Leper Deba, Sidada. Nyembe da chue de ju gapsom and yi leper deba se semdi and go chue nyala semchen at namyang chen yu cho ma dang wa che di chue de pa da sam dang che to nyen gu re se chen le ya hu chen nyen gu re se da na yu nyen de ya hu nyen da yi leper deba se de na yu deba se nye le na yu nyen ya hu nyen ba Yi Lava Deba, Yi Horan, Samlo Horan, the Chad Matian Digason, Namia Shanda, Dushan, some Madanch, Dushin, Dushin Yanguri, Zed, and Sungwa.
Looking at this new presentation, or looking at this new part, that being so, we can categorize this into 4. The first being strong interest in the Dharma. Here, or strong enthusiasm in the Dharma. So what's been emphasized here is that we should have a deep yearning, a strong enthusiasm for the Dharma, so as to, as was mentioned earlier, to overcome any distractions such as laziness. And to build on that, there's the second quality, a fully attentive or focused mind whilst listening. In other words, whilst engaging in the teachings, hearing teachings, one needs to be attentive, focused on the teachings, listening well, not distracted by thoughts that have nothing to do with the Dharma. So these are the first two qualities, strong enthusiasm and a focused or attentive mind.
Lagaro odinga diche ho dinde yora sembe da ane ji dene ji tu go ya sembe samlo dene ji dene yungurwa chesa de di za yi de nyen go de ina sem di chue di ne chalo chos chasa ma ta wa je ane shanda ne sam go za di dene na ne chue de ya go jing ne ba da da ji ya go le tu me ro dene za dene ki pa namye pa ji pa sem yang wa di pa ga che ne and the chief some children guys and then can't share the layout when young go as such. Some more about that as a deneging the young girl on the line.
So it's all too common whilst listening to teachings for various thoughts to arise in one's mind, and thoughts to do with our various activities or perhaps one's work, in brief down to our various wants and needs. And this is what draws our mind. And it can all too easily happen that we stay away from the teaching for quite a while. And this means we'll come out of the teaching without having understood the topic that well, in particular, not having engaged with the topic. In other words, whilst we had the opportunity to hear and reflect deeply, taking inspiration and reflecting deeply on what's being said, our mind was scattered to our various activities, wants and needs.
아데네기 지금 저기 최 년비 균형보를 년도에는 지금 아직 셈두스네 남야 쇼하도 용고를 봐. 진짜 데네 요데 람사 오당 데네 용고도 다 지년만년 쳐스게 믿든지 야보시년 두미도 안데네 베지날 데네 손샤딩이 다다 차이면도 셈베게 셈주 차야 매어래. 제가 데네게 가는 줄에 말에 당보와 된장한 줄이야 지금 남야다 녀모 숙심보여 봐서 데네게 용구로와 이내다 데네요도 갑래야 지금 소수게 젠바제 항상 어디디 야고 마신 파 각답에 톱시를 따야다 아주 베지제의 계층보로와 만도야 데네 용구도 어디 베지나 데네 시제디나 따따 용구도 때따 따따 마연데가 제메제미도 선샤샤베네 데네 안에 그 균에 라야 균에 메르와 여러분이 메르와 제가 디네자 당한줄 디네 용도 갑람사 셈쇼 마샤바제 또 어디지 야게 파 지게 잼비기 시신된 잼비기 진저 어디지 호르셈베 두시야게 두시야디 계시 마샤그로와 두시네 진데 장기장에지는 거 야게 루그로와 당한줄로와
Certainly, it's very common whilst listening to teachings, especially if it's not just a few sentences, they're quite long, that distraction will arise. And if this happens and it keeps happening, and one now sees what's presented, you think, I'm not a good student. This is describing students beyond my capacity. This is too difficult for me. This is a mistaken way to think. Here one's mind is being drawn towards an extreme. Rather, recognize where one is, accept that, but strive to develop. Using qualities such as mindfulness, keep aware of one's mental focus, and when it's distracted, let go of whatever one is thinking about and come back to the teaching. In this way, then, one's mind will stay relaxed, and one's confidence will not be shaken. One will not fall into the trap of thinking that this is beyond oneself. But rather, just accept, I'm a beginner, this is how it is. And then when the mind's distracted, and you notice it, immediately let go of whatever it is one's thinking about, and return to the Dharma. And by being disciplined in this way, doing it again and again, just like with all the other good qualities, through training, our concentration will also improve.
저기 지난 지속의 롭종 가래네 당번에 롭종 장아 장들이 약보시어 말아 되네 그 마셔지 되네 제게 노트 쇼쇼야 장이 전에 고 야기 두고로와 저기 되네 약보 차죠 디나진 집어랑 저기 되네기 최초였는데 샘기 토네 되게 심 장도를 지어야 되네. 당번에 지게 비즈니스 쉐바나 당번에 다가라는데 장고에서 가야 말하고 야보에 들어와. 지난번에 매번 자당 저기 두신 비즈니스 가서 손셔서 된 맞다. 되게 소소 삼나라야 지게 되게 요아엘이야. 배수지기 제지내고 네 주노트 쇼베네 아직 배수지기 야게 땅 공부 제배내고 이제 야게 줘야 차대로 맞아 지 당번에 가지고 내 당보라야 지 비즈니스 쉐바는 다가라 용투에 갈래 하고로와 지사데 디나신 비즈니스 송반의 디니 송도와 디나 송반의 디니 용야게야 소수기 이 배수지기 제지야 곰제야 공부 당기전에 가슴 질이야. 근데 비즈니스 소만하지 다가라직 레투에게 직고 레투로 와. 되네자 어디 남상은 저게 가브리엘이야. 아다리 때 따다 용문데 제메제 가면 비즈니스 쉐바나진데 제도면 된디 마제 유샨디도 와선베게 셈주 차제 파샤샤레 용시바로와 전디네자 당번에 장도네 야보야요 말하도 거기리길리 장기 이야기 다이로 와서 곰고그래 세디로 와다 곰세디 당번에 야보여야 되네 곰고에서 가요 말 야보 매완자디 야야지 곰야야 삼다 야야 삼내서 거기 두신 장기 지진에 야기 당고라지도 곰고그래 세디로 와다.
In life, whatever one studies, it is difficult at first. And it can be confusing at first, in particular when one is still trying to understand the broader context, how things fit together. So it is difficult, it is confusing. And if this is how it is in general in life, so too, when we're trying to study the Dharma and when we're trying to train our mind through integrating what we study. So there are these two components of what we are doing, establishing the basis for meditation and meditating, studying and reflecting. So whilst it is difficult and it's expected that we will have obstacles such as a distracted mind, have confidence that through sustained effort, transformation will follow. Because the process of transforming the mind is the same as developing habits in any aspect of life. Through repeated effort over a sustained period, new habituations will develop, old unwanted habituations will weaken. This is certain. But it does require sustained effort. So therefore, if thoughts arise that this is too much, this is beyond me, this is too difficult for me, let go of those. Don't believe in them. Let them go. And rather, continue. Draw one's mind back to the teaching, listening, thinking about its meaning, integrating it in that way.
되게 난 연배에서 일해볼 때 봐서 하고 신경 고려해서 되네 최단 최모와를 그버침을 줘봐 세도야 최리야 대바당 아니 최 순간 라마라 아니 무시했다 아니 대바지 고려해서 최단 최모와를 그버침을 줘봐서 무시했다 대바지 고려해서.
Then the third quality, great respect for the Dharma and the expounder of the Dharma.
되네 니시에 돈에 레시 짐바데스 지나다 니시에 돈에 레시 짐바스데 다지게 다디지 대신어도 강리야 샤야디 디레 가소르 레니 넘버 쳐봐 사야디 마 최승현디게 됐은 너르다 마티버를 송고에바나 안파디 제거야 말파 디초스도가 말했습니다 디마제 아니지게 남지게 야고치 송바네 델리안 초스디 냠슬랭 고리에서 레시 Geshe Thubten Rabten.
This fourth quality then is, whilst listening, using one's knowledge, through using one's intelligence, distinguish between teachings which are in accordance with the Dharma and follow those, and those that appear to be mistaken, put them to one side. Do not follow those. That's the fourth quality.
나디네게 예시도네 레시 짐바스데다 소소게 도시네 지게 최신지 송요도 라랑게 라메게다 소소게 지 데스 마리바라지 만지 송바이나 람사 오다디 송데 베 노르슈레샤센데 한지 라마야 균주시에다 균다디 제네지메서레 어디다야메 지메바레 지나다 레시 짐바스데다 레 강셰바데 야고레시티 촐도 samdani ni anchik chel ma ti samdana gi chel ni ri da
when one does spot a flaw in the teaching, a mistake, the way to respond is not to immediately criticize, immediately get all worked up, but rather, once has heard something which one believes to be mistaken, just put that to your side. Don't follow that. That is a more skillful approach.
Tawa disu ke nangorwa. Da lama seling ba de sem zambare so re chetam duji yu chetam je temba tupare sa che. Ane chetam je duji ra temba tupare ma to chetam je ranshin jubi tongbe tongba di ke lingo marwa. Tisa dine za lama seling bi gi dusine ye de ane joji gi lama seling ba de chetam je ranshin jubi tongba ni ke lingo be dujare no ju resne ke lingo so de tago marwa. Tisa mi Koran tawa tusine semzebe tawa di kare. And she shued me to tell a kushata, Devada, Janshimi Yamle Rimbadi to Shune, Lama, Jedusine danger, Dus Nangorwa, on Dinashin. Is that the person and Lama selling be chetam ranshin tribute, non by the Omare, said the chetam, Uji chetam, Temba Rubare, said Shenangor there. Chisna Lama George. Di lama selling bigi di tawati chosu jugo marwa jugo ma da chosu jona nan cheda dije cheda je temba dubare cheda ranji de tongba de yo mare sen kelingo ro di je kelingo ma di chosu ma son wa je da di de uma be tunju bigi tawal sam ta be na di an cheda je dije cheda je temba dubare sa di da chegyo marwa je da di di choso mason wache cheza di ba dor sen da di ba los mason de dor dene ane ni le xie ga de sen jam ni je chen ju da chen nyam che ge an jing nyam len che ge jin ba ma son de le xie di su le jin ba de len ba je zong du xie ne le nye ye nam ba che be de le xie nie xie dor ne le xie jin ba se de bi ro xie de ne xie ba na on du xie ne song go ro.
A well-known illustration that we'll come to shortly in the text, shortly in the text, but relevant here is that of Lama Atisha and his relationship with his teacher, Selingpa. Lama Atisha held the middle way view, accepting that all phenomena are empty of inherent existence, whereas one of his teachers, Selingpa, held the Chittamatran view, that phenomena are empty of are truly existent, and does not accept that phenomena are empty of inherent existence. So here we have Atisha's teacher, who, if he were to have been teaching the view to Atisha, the way Atisha would have responded is to not have accepted this presentation, the Chittamatran view, because he had known through his own analysis and reasoning that these teachings are mistaken, they are flawed. They are correct Buddhist teachings, but there's a fault in the philosophy, whereas the middle way view is unmistaken. So Lama Atisha would have rather rejected those teachings, put them to one side, but without losing any of his faith and respect in Lama Selingpa, those teachings that were on how to develop bodhicitta, these he applied himself to thoroughly. So this here is a clear illustration of a skillful way to relate when teachings are flawed. Rather, reject them, put them to one side. Those which are unmistaken, those one should apply to one's mind.
Nan dine shibo di tunji ne lo da de ba yin la se de da dine ge shibo di dunye chawa an che nyen be se an yi le ba de ba an che da che ma wa le gu ba ye da an ji ge do se ne an ji ge le nye she do ne le she zin ba de an che hu re se je san di ya ko yon ya la da shibo di tunji de ya pan do 주권이 가려서 로다 된바 레긴 남바 집이 셔럽 저도 다 되니게 셰럽도 요바나 판도 연구를 지선로 되된 말이에요. 가진 도와는 로수르 네바오 세다 가진 파더 세데 파세데 아니 로수르 네바직 파치 차 가서 차당이 초소 말로 가지고 그래 차당이 초소 놓아 있는 수르 네바 연구 말이야 제가 되네자 아니 차당 초소 말로 가지고 그래 제자디 수르 네바들이 진짜 수르 네바디 여바나 가진 도와디 연구를 해서
So this is an alternative list then of 4 qualities the student should have. The first being a strong interest or strong enthusiasm in the Dharma. The second being a fully focused or attentive mind whilst listening. Thirdly, great respect for the Dharma and the expounder of the Dharma. And fourthly, holding to good explanations and rejecting faulty ones. Then the text continues that intelligence, or this using our wisdom, thinking for ourselves, this is a conducive circumstance for those 4. So in other words, to the extent that we use our intelligence, we think for ourselves, that serves to develop and strengthen those 4 good qualities. And furthermore, impartiality is what eliminates adverse circumstances. So remaining open-minded eliminates adverse circumstances. Thinking for oneself, this improves these 4 good qualities.
Tisanda suru neba kasa loda denba sidu lenye ye number 70 sherapsigruwa jina dini enza dini yobene chue dunye chimbo yongya de le pingores ora kare pingores ne chue lia chi dunye chebe ne dunye dumba yobena an dela dine ko jaya doba de ba zan je jang ba ne singires ta jaya ge dunye ge dumba khora ki men ta jang maro ma jan ta sing maro asa bege dini ge nami ge yawa che sherap de yawa che do chesa ji jang wala delia jang do ge dumba dunye ge dumba ki wa de je ge chen bo do sam be sam dang de ko dini sam dang de ko yawa pha ma ge dunye ja di chue de nyam ne je dunye dumba ma ge ba na 디게 경험하비요 바다 듬바께 봐 있나 디 대부 안데 냠레리 바 야고 용거 바데 데네게 발로 제바 제자 하고 요도 안 되니 듬바께 알레 판도시 용거를 판교로 와 듬바께로 와 디나신다 최년배지 이레벌 뭐되 반다 어디 니 고하다라 남면선데 년년거데 디주 철라로 차 안데지 야고 셈랭 해봐 용민도 와디 노트레도 와셈배 삼다 디 노트레도 와셈 하고 와제 다 데레데 안베지 야고지 년제 파 남면데 예바 지로디 파 강송에 델파 지랑 삼다 년배나 안데 로리 바 이리 해봐 용야 다 너나다 하고 와디 디 야고도 셈배게 내니게 삼레 레행이 넘바 쳐봐 하고 해도 되네 이래버 줘봐도 핑기로와 되나니 최당 최만인 발라 최당 안 최모벌 구버게 되라 최리야 대바다 최리야 최모벌이야 구버게나 안 될때네 안 디자인의 최슈 되바다 최디 로미어제 되바기 듬바야 보여야 될려 구셔맞게 봐야 될려 안지 어디 될려 안지 최슈에 되바메바 최디를 로중에 되바等于 듬바메바 리고반자 안디 지금 민노선 배삼로 두친데 삼당배나 직고 시럽기도 신에 이 교연다 연된디기 파 삼노다 하고요도 이제서 핑거를 해서 그래서 튕긴 차다 튕비 인세도 로버체 판도 용나데 수용 거래서 와
in intelligence or using our wisdom or thinking for ourselves aids all 4 of these qualities. So, for example, the first one of strong enthusiasm in the Dharma, if that is not cultivated, in other words, one is a little bit lazy, by using our intelligence, we can firstly notice our laziness, notice our lack of enthusiasm, and then secondly, recall the faults of laziness and the benefits that will follow through applying ourselves to the Dharma with strong enthusiasm. So thereby, using our intelligence, we'll be aware of the arisal of laziness or the dominance of laziness and be able to think of the faults of laziness and the benefits of enthusiasm, and thereby overcome our laziness and engage with enthusiasm. Similarly, with the second quality of being fully attentive, through our usage of intelligence, we'll be aware when our attention is not full, when we are distracted. And we may well need to rely on our intelligence then, because we've been drawn to something that we are attached to, thinking about our wishes and our wants, some things in the past or the future, and being drawn to something that's attracted us. We will need to use our intelligence to remind us of the faults of not utilizing this opportunity to hear the teaching, to think deeply on it, and the benefits of engaging well with the teaching that we are receiving. So thereby, our intelligence aids the second quality of being fully attentive. And so too, with the third quality, we will use our intelligence to notice when our attitude is not one of respect towards the teacher or the teaching, and rather and then further we'll use our intelligence to remind ourselves of the qualities of the teacher and the teaching, and thereby be able to engage with a respectful attitude, which will aid our mind being open and receptive.
Lame ji rung wi ge che nam sa chang ma chang da la chang na an ga wa kum ma chang na chi ma chun che du chang wi ge yu la me bar ja os.
And the paragraph concludes, examine whether all the qualities that you would make examine whether all the qualities that would make you suitable to be guided by a guru are complete, and cultivate joy if they are. If they are not complete, strive to create the causes for their completion before your life is over.
Deshi Ganglia and Jig Lomiki Kiju Dinis Kuria Dinimati Kiju Diki Dusen Samta Hagoache Hagone Dine Dini Kiju Diki Chasa Sosonalia that Jig Tangu Midu Sushin Shimjushia Warriors Dine Tangna and Gawagum send the Sosolia Diniki Kiju Diki Tadin and Payaburesha Sempe Soso Gawagumiana and Diniki Mudiji Dele and the Yargeta Mutiji Dushin Nya Jigjalia. Jigjaores Hanakao. That is Sangiman and Dayanji Jigliana, Jigs Masawada, and East Masa Sumasa, did the Gajele, Jisosle Kishu Chasadi, Data, the Sangimena, and they got Daji Shasha Jango Marasumanoa, Denia Chimotsunchi, so then Susulia, Mahomba, Dinigi, Jig. 기주디게 찬양에 돈달이야 소수기파 율파 장도르지 베주지 오래서 진짜 치마 춘치에도 상업이 율에 배버자고.
Yeah, Lama Tsongkhapa is summarizing how we should relate to what he's presented, which is that we should use our intelligence right now and investigate whether we are fully qualified students or not, whether we are fully qualified receptacles for the teachings or not. So investigate ourselves. And where we recognize that we do have these good qualities, rejoice in that. Where we recognize that these good qualities are lacking, we should strive to develop them. And in this way, we'll be able to utilize well our relationship with the spiritual teacher.
On that dinner, then Dinma, the Shing of Jugida, Lami Kishu the Pashusa, that Dinigi, that Lami Kishu, Kivu, Sumgi, Lamgirimpe, Yamlengi, Chasan, Tintuga, Lama, the Kishu Judah, the Mashkuri, hesitation, the Chishu. That dinner. Dan Lamigi, the Nigger Lamigi, Keju Judah, the Lama Tigi, Sumbigi, Che, the Payakun Yamlin Jet, Yahu together, Lomatilia, Keju, the Nesawat, Keju Sumna, Kejunga, Sobat in Sawat Kuri said, all those Chene and Lami Keju, Lumi Keju, Lam, Kivusum, Lamiri, Yamlin Jet, the Keju, the Net, and Kuri said, she savare. That in ma, Lama Digi. Nakaso Loma together, Lama di Denhand, Den Suti can distinguish said that Lamiki, Lomik Lama Dena, Digor my sugar.
Thus far in this chapter, we've looked at the need for a spiritual teacher and what characteristics a spiritual teacher requires in order to be a fully qualified spiritual teacher of the Mahayana. And ideally, the teacher should have all 10 of the qualities that were looked at earlier. But in order for the relationship with one's spiritual teacher to be fully effective, the student also requires good qualities, particular characteristics. And this is because, as we looked at previously, the relationship is interdependent. The teacher cannot do all the work for the student. They both, for the relationship to be successful, they both need particular good qualities. So here we see a presentation that can be divided into 3 or 4 or 5. And these are required in order for the student and the teacher, for their relationship to bear the greatest fruit. And now we come to the next section, which is how the student should rely on the teacher for their spiritual development to come about rapidly.
Lama tsingi dan den midin ngar sheba dar dalas, tsingi dan den bala chue ye gedin never jawos.
The new outline, the way to rely. Thus, someone endowed with the characteristics of a suitable vessel should examine, as explained above, whether a teacher has the necessary characteristics, and if so, receive the kindness of the Dharma from him.
Didarane dan ba sido dijing anzugi lomigi keju ane dini sumna denba digi so dini ne da denba keju de denba digi ne lama tsingi dan den me den ar sheba da dala sido ngazu nyelia lame tsingi keju ju da denba ku re seji dini sonro dini ge lamigi keju tsingi de da denba re mi sen bi loma digi lami keju de la lame de keju du mi sen dan bo da shi je ko re so re dala se.
Here at the outset, we are linked to what has come before, but it starts with the responsibility of the student to both examine their own mind and to ascertain whether they have the characteristics described above, whether one presents them in the divisions of 3, 4, or 5. So the first job of the student is to see whether they are a qualified receptacle for the teachings of the Dharma. Secondly, the student needs to investigate or examine the teacher to see whether they possess those 10 good qualities that were described earlier. And if both one has these qualities as well as the teacher being fully qualified too, then one is ready to receive the kindness of the Dharma from him.
Tena tigu mindu lama dele kecho chasang changdu changmindu sebegeda dashi chi che tene changdu sambada da jidu sembe sambachuna ane chi cheshu gore sungora chisa dambone cheshu yodene dambone lama tingo yo mare sungora.
To be able to examine whether a teacher is qualified or not, one needs to study under the guidance of that teacher. So therefore, when one is first receiving teachings from a teacher, one cannot rely on them yet as one's guru, one's lama. Rather, one needs to first get to know them, to receive teachings from them, to establish whether they have the required qualities or not.
Ma chike loma che sundu ga lamsa anchi chue shuali de lamsang loma resene loma chike loma tsingwa yo mare se dinashe an lami na lome ke chike chue ko ta ta ru kan chagidu ka samlo kunlong kan resha me do shimju she da du chene shimju she gore se cheza lami ke loma ta ba da then Lumigi Lamaya Taba, the Nigget Tane, Lamigi Loma Tachi, Lamrim Yamlingi, Loma Chiso, the Nigi Kitchen, Temba to give me some to Sine, Kitchen Temba Chibanet, but Lomalpa, and so it's Yada. Then Lumi when the Lamalaya Kitchen, that Kitchen that they were somewhere, Lumigi the Lamatia to Sine, Gurias, this Dambone and the Jig, Dondala, Lumi when in a Lama Chick 200 Lamsa, Lamatia Mares. The Laming when in a Lama Church when she reached Lamsa and the Jig Loma Tingo Mares, to see the Dambo, Taxi, Shimju, Tini, Game Mabata, no dream about the Tinina, and catch them by the checking that they didn't go.
As mentioned a few weeks ago, when we came to the end of presenting the characteristics of the Lama, the responsibility of a teacher is also to examine whether the students have the qualities required for them to be a suitable student of the teacher. So from both sides, when a teacher and a student meet, they should not be immediately saying, this is my Lama, or this is my student, but rather they both should spend time teaching and receiving teachings and examining each other to see whether the relationship can be formed if the student recognizes the qualities in the teacher and if the teacher recognizes the required qualities in the student. This is the way to proceed.
Chue Nyamba Zemji Loma Chaya Marda, Loma Chagio Marwa, Chizan Loma Chai, Chue Shuba Zemji, Chue Nyamba, Loma Chagres, Loma Chagio Marwa, Chizada Loma Chagio Mare, Dinenza, and that Chue Nyenda Loma Chana, and Chue Shuna Loma Chagan, Loma had Chagres and some not sure, but the Lama di. Shuna and Nyamba and Loma Chaving ever men and Loma had a chagri, said some of the Karayungruada. So that is a Chue Nyamba Zamji Loma Chamba. Then Lama Chasadi, Sosugi, Lama Dizane, Chue Shuegin, Devaki, Chue Shugins, Lama Ditin, Lama Dizan, Chue Shugins, Sosu Gulonia, Lama Ditin, Lama Ditin, Dizan, Chue Shugins, Gulonchi. Yueba Jueche, Yuba Tone, and Shuyatang. Laming when in a Dangi Kolia, and Ducian Jesu Zinche, Lomaching, Chushikin Sempiki, and Laming when a Ducian or Convache, and the Konim Chusu Jevachik, that Chu Mangushuba, Shunaya, or Shumo, Chu Sarjik Sheven, and Loma Chegore. And then Lomigi when a Lama Dingy and a Lama Danger Church, you in Lama Dingy Sebes Kulong, Lama de Ding made in a court and my Lobjon gone to the Jin Yangis and some Kulon Dinike, Churkazanian Bene, Loma Chaska, Lodam, Dawada Dinikin Bene, Loma Chamero, Chisandala, Lama, the Loma Chadi, Loming when a Lama dia, Danger. 电这个电这个电的对不接的呢，怕电影是别上大些都是呢，去学它。那边我呢，那电影罗马基金的两个去学影是别的那个上大些，去学的年些这边呢，那么的罗马采过来，里面呢，那么罗马采过嘛的。
Therefore, what one hears is that when someone is teaching the Dharma and someone is hearing that teaching, they do not necessarily form a teacher-student relationship. Rather, over a period of time of the teacher teaching and the student receiving the teachings, engaging with the teachings, such a relationship can be formed. But for the relationship to be formed, there is a process, first of the teachings merely being given and merely being received. But later, in addition, the thought from the student side that needs to conjoin the activity of hearing is the thought, this is my Lama, this is my teacher. So there is this the combination of receiving teachings and receiving them with the attitude that this teacher is my Lama. Similarly, from the side of the teacher will merely teach, sharing his or her Dharma knowledge with their students. But after having examined the potential students, the teacher needs to generate in his or her own mind the attitude that this is my student. And then in this way, the teacher-student relationship is established.
There's not Lumigi and the Lama singing at the end, meeting Tashi Kabla, and watch you, Nigo, what the Nye, and Tava, she can she to Sibinieta, and the Nigi Ajik, Sosugi Lama and the Che, and the Canet to be Shimju chair, and the Membe Ajik, Rangi, Lode, Ishe, Chesage, and Chandalia, and the Lama di Korgi, that Kesha that got a 2 minute chicken, Nya, Gitia Ungrua, and Chisona, the son that Jagaya was a Jagana, Lamigi, Notary Caracheme, Notary to the Guinchi, Caracarache to put and the negation you say, Ungrua, says that the Neza, Dusine, Rangi, Pa, Nye, and Jiggy, the Tata Rig to Mendusada, Yan Rangi, Lodi, Shepige, the Solia, and the Jig, Kishiti Alasoba, and the Nigitone, Dusine Shimju Tap, Jada. The Chiganji, Tagan, Tabas, Miaji, Tata, Imbi, Never Yomatasana, Tagan, Zuma, Monesia, Zuma, Mangori, just at the nation, Lamsa, the nation, the Kodi Kabla, Chigan, the Soy, Shimchuchi, Tashi, got a 2 minutes, Udushin, Yabura, Tashi, that did that didn't give some other jigsaw assembly, some Luchuna, that didn't Sosurangi, at that chair, that didn't get Lamatea Gidushin. Jigmabache to Timbache to Shine, the Netigorova, and then the Chesan, Donda Disi near that damn big near the Dembati, Lama singing that day, meeting Arshapatar, Talas, singing that Dembaina, and this and the Lama did Chushu, getting the Chao said. Never Chao Chushu or Lama danger Chushu or.
Therefore, the way a student of the Dharma should proceed is that they need to first spend a period of time receiving teachings, and over that period of time, they need to fulfill the qualities of the students in that they are engaging with the teachings. And whilst engaging with the teachings, they'll come to know whether the teacher has the characteristics that are required or not, because they'll be able to judge, for example, whether the teaching is mistaken or not, and so forth. Moreover, in addition to receiving teachings from a prospective teacher, the student will be thinking about the good qualities of the teacher, examining whether they are observable or not, and moreover, will be hearing what generally is said about the teacher. These days on the internet, one can read about any misgivings that may have been expressed in the past, but also one knows that on the internet one can read a variety of things. Some are closer to the truth than others. But here, there is no rush. One can take one's time, examining the teacher, getting to know them, and to see if they are someone that one sincerely wants to rely on, someone that one sincerely sees as a genuine and authentic teacher. And when one is ready to make that commitment, then from one's own side, one generates that aspiration, or that determination rather, that I will now continue to receive teachings as I have been, but I will be now receiving them from my Lama, and I will rely on him as my Lama. And it's at that point then that one can be said that one will receive the kindness of the Dharma from him.
Lama Kava Shu, you're the Gera Shuchi, your water, Jeremiah said, Shuchi, you're a Kava. She said, Dine exam, Kerumich, Geshe Jeremiah said, the Gera, you can see an ass and bear some large notion. Jenny Yayon, Baris, Yayon, Pevaris, Ya page, and then Jeremiah, Sonja, Nasa, Gilia, page, doos, and what the call Sonja, doos, Yen, Dures, or Jesatic, Loma de Coron Cavariza, Diniki Jeremiah, the Cane, Yuna, Chikera, Shu, Chicane, Yuna, Mena, some Jeduchin, Dushi, Dasher, and Nach, and Duchin, Shuveres, the pass. Then do singing to do that me, Kevin Zalamsa, that you must soon down at the Nitini, Keshe Yuba de Hagurua, Jezan, Dine that Jelia, and then Gelegation, then Jelia, and Jeremy Loma Chavares, the Loma Chavaz, that Loma Naneda, Chick ordered Udushin and Chason Wadi, Dine that Nambone got Kerimichiko. Geshe Thubten Loma Mare Kevare, Chesna Dambo, Jeremy Songsa del Panye, La de Chigi, Cheshuagi, Denigi, Donia Dumbache, and Shugoma Dambone, Ganes Sungudu, Garagashi, Sungudu, Sempeke Dustin, Chedaj, Dasia, the Dushin Pen, Niam, Dushi, Niambares, and the Gazam Gilia Dushin, that Jeremy Sundadi, Keshu, Chasa, all that it be massive, Resha, some jet, that D. Lama Martin did that, Tabmin, that thing go to Sembi Dushin, General Lamatin Bares, Lamatin Dushuares, this and Sungudua.
Can take as an illustration, the great lamas from the past, Kedep Rinpoche and Gyaltsen Rinpoche. So they were well-known and highly regarded lamas in the Sakya tradition. But they had heard about this lama who was now in central Tibet, Lama Tsongkhapa, who had a remarkable reputation. So they came to see what all the fuss was about. So they came to Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings with some curiosity. And sitting there, hearing his teachings, and based on their own prior studies, so their own extensive knowledge, they could, based on what they were hearing and observing, that Lama Tsongkhapa truly was a remarkable being. And in this way, they then later became his students. And the key point here is, when they first came to Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings, they didn't come with the attitude of, this is a famous person that everyone is saying amazing things about. I am going to be his student. Rather, they came with curiosity. They came with those qualities of a student, being open-minded, thinking for themselves, curious about the teachings. And then, by hearing, by observing, by reflecting, they came to recognize Geshe Rinpoche as really being a remarkable being. And then, when stable faith had arisen, they were able to rely on him with sincerity through seeing him as a genuine and authentic teacher.
Nadine, Nedar Gedin Neba Jidangs, Kabaratu Yonsu Zobigi, Dama Gi, Lulepor Chibiki, Shinin de Timbi Tsulanis.
The text continues. As for the way to rely on a spiritual teacher from whom, in general, you receive the kindness of the Dharma, and who, in particular, guides your mind well by means of perfectly complete instructions, there are 2 points.
Dedar Gedin Neba Jidangs, the Jidan Lama, Gevo Chungwe Lamirin Batimpi, something Lama Yungurua, Givu Dinge Lamirin Batinga Yungurua, Deneki Chimba. Nekiwo deneke jidan lama dusine gedin nebe lama gedin neba jidan se deneke chöshuza lama jidan ba se ora de khabar du se de kiwo chung da tumo alam yirin ba da denma ti deneke bo dinge lam tumo alam yirin ba pha ti deneke bo chimbe lam yirin ba pha ti 기부 숨게 남기림배 냠레림배 마진 차상 치투게 지겐게 개발도 용소 봐서데 기부 중에 투명한 남기림 봐 기부 등다 투모하는 일이 봐 기부 침보 투명한 일이 봐 가서 기부 침보다 기부 침배 남기림 봐 차상 치 용소 봐 치게네 남가기 도스네 난겐기 데네게 라마티 안에 lo lepa tibi ge se do dinegi lepa pa yonsu ba je mano ma cho je tibi ge gibi shinyen de ane denso de la ane sam denso kan de shore sin denso de ya da ni yong re sa ji
One is likely to receive teachings from many teachers, guiding one in the trainings that are associated with the being of initial capacity, presenting the teachings that may be associated with the practitioner of initial capacity, perhaps presenting teachings associated with the practitioner of intermediate capacity, or perhaps presenting teachings associated with the practitioner of supreme capacity. But then there are those teachers that one sincerely relies on. They are those lamas are the spiritual teachers who guide you through the cultivation of those various stages of training, going through the correct sequence, guiding you in how to develop that sequence within your continuum. And how to rely on such a teacher, there are 2 points.
Denige lama jidang ba jidang so lama tele ya ji gebu chungwe lam yirin ba zam den tupje gebu chimbe lam yirin ba ani chege da den ma tuba yonguru ba de kyaba chimbe ge lam nyamling ge rimba de ma shin ba gebu chungwe lam yirin ba shin dene den tuba lama denige ya nyan ju lam yirin ba pa chi tu ge lama dene ne chasan kyaba chimbe lam yirin ba tim ma tuba na denige jina lama de la 망고 연구로 받아 수수게 지난 디네 연구를 다들 개발도 쓰도 다들 갑들은 안저 개발도 아니 기부 중요한 미림 바 투모할 미림 바 파티 안된 마 이야기로도 되는 기부 중요한 미림 바 파티 내내 이야기도 되 기부 침별한 미림 바 된지 두스네 냠네 딩가 라마티 개발도 봐 제가 디네 라마 간시네 라마 디나델이야 다 라마 간시네 라마식 소소이 된 비갑라 다 기부 Dinge lam yirimba chigengi del lobcho chiga lam loma tiga lama tiayin ma da dene kibu chungwe lam yirimba chigengi lam loma tiga lama tienba ina da sungwa la ya anchi tunge lama tienba ina da de tiena de la ya lama tiena de la ri za ni samta la ni yongore sa chiru tiena ni se de tu se ora sungro ba.
This differentiation that's been made between general and particular. General, one should understand, as someone who guides one or teaches one only to do with specific aspects of the path. So they may only be qualified to teach specific aspects of the paths that need to be cultivated, perhaps trainings associated with initial or the intermediate capacity. Then there are those teachers who are fully qualified, and they can guide one in all 3 stages of training, in how to cultivate the foundational levels, and based on those, the higher levels of training, and based on those, the greatest levels of training, and so forth. So for both classes of teachers, so those who are qualified to only teach specific areas, and those who are qualified to teach the entirety of the path, there are 2 ways to rely on both types of teacher.
Lama City, Yang Jungi, Jike, Lama Dizan, Chema Shune, Lama Dizal, Wong Shuela Sobada, Lama Dizan, Dombo Shuela Soba, Dini Shune, and the Anjik Chushu Mara, the Nungurwa, the Lama Bene, Jike Tarn Bursin, Dizal Lama Dombo Shu, the Wong Shu, and Jelia Dizan Lama Chushu Mara, Mabungurwa, the Nigga Lama Wong Shubin, Lama Wong Shubin, Lama Chasarwa. Then Lama Dizan, Dombo Shu and Lama Sawa. 제가 인지미 라마데라 인지미디다 기보스미 라미디베 냠네 차사 디자네 슈고하시미도와 제가 님메아잔다 라마데라 망고요로 와서다 제가 게딘 네베 라마 지당스도다 소소리아 게딘 네바 도모슈 근데 안 도모슈야다 왕슈야다 데니게 맹아슈야라 소바다 인디네 야 소소리아 저기 지기 라펜 라마르 나틱시 라마르 지 망고요로 아데니게 라마 망고요레스 데즈이나 라마 텐나데라 텐고고레스 텐고데도 삼당고로 라마 텐고고로 라마 텐차바인자나 라마르와 안디나신다 캬와도 기보 숨게 라미림바 냠네 차사 림바 텐두게 라마세다 지사데 텐나세다 라마 지세데 게디니베 라마 게디니베 지세데 라마세데 디나 라마나라 소수기 기보스미 람니리베 티겐기 롭종 바 지제 최슈사 라마 용거래 데네기 최마슈베나 왕점 슈디게 라마 용거래 왕점 라마 지제 디제는 dom바제 슈이제 최션다 어찌 슈야 고마라 라마 용거라 제가 라마 지세디 디스오르디나데 라마데 망부에 디게서
So there are some teachers that one can only interact with sporadically because one is not regularly in their presence. There are others that one is able to interact with regularly. And amongst these, there will be those who one interacts with in a specific context and others in a far broader context. And amongst these, some of these, through the interaction, they necessarily become one's spiritual teacher, and others, one perhaps does not necessarily become their students, or they become one's teachers. But for all of them that become your teachers, there will be these two ways to rely, or 2 points in how to rely, that we are coming to. But further, so some teachers who necessarily become one's lamas are those from whom one receives vows of any type, or from those from whom one receives initiations. So prior to receiving vows and initiations, one will have done the process as described above, and one will necessarily become their students and they their teachers. They will become your teachers through the process of receiving vows and initiations. Then there are others for whom may give teachings on particular aspects of the path, or on the entirety of the path, the entirety of the 3 scopes. And there one will also examine and then may decide to become their students, may come to recognize their qualities and seeing them as authentic teachers, rely on them as such. So for whomever one becomes their student and they your teacher, whether they are a lama where one has a specific relationship, such as they only teach certain topics to you, or you've received vows from them, or if you rely on someone as your lama who teaches the entirety of the scope, the way to rely is the same and will be presented through 2 points. Then the 2 points are the way to rely in thought and the way to rely through actions. Continuing with the text, the way to rely in thought, this has 2 points: the root, training in faith, and remembering his kindness so as to generate respect.
Andelia, Anjige, Yendendige, Dusina, Samda, Kuyu, and Sungu, and Tuyu, and then Badangajig, and Dusina, Lamigi, Shanlia, Pendo, Truptang, Shanlia, Chu, then the negative getting the pa, the neighbor kitchen, and then Shanlia, Zewa, Zewu, and then and the G, Jamniji, Yamlanchi Yoba, and the Zewu, and then and the G, and Garsore. Ani ma che sung bi ge denigi chen le pan de che bi yuan den di pa sam da je denigi gu sung tu su yuan de ane ting ye jing ye la be yuan de zu ge la be yuan de denigi she la be den de yuan den di pa sam da je denigi ane de lia da la ma yuan den de tu a da la ma be ma se ya ku re de sim be ge be ya ku re sim be da denigi de ba cha de the Jang Deva Jang Ladu, so Sugi Dushin, Deva Kin, Yana, Yado Yankin, Deva Pa, and the Jumsen Samda Dushin, Deva Pa, Jangores, or that Deva Dushin, Yana, some Dangores, the Ni Jamda Vena, and Gazam Julia, Gitina, Lamatilia, Deva Timbu, and this Yuamaba Yungures, just not the Deva Jang said, our Deva Jang said.
purpose here is to reflect on the many good qualities of a particular Lama, qualities associated with his body, with his speech, and with his mind. And through reflecting on these, faith arises. So, for example, the 10 characteristics that were mentioned before, looking for those, seeing them in one's Lama, reflecting on them again and again, seeing, for example, his loving and compassionate nature, seeing his qualities of ethics, concentration, and wisdom, and so forth. And through reflecting, based on reasons, faith will arise. So the training here is to intentionally generate faith in one's teacher again and again, but generate faith by utilizing reasons. And through doing this repeatedly over a sustained period, based on reasons, generating faith, by doing so repeatedly over a sustained period, one's faith becomes ever more stable and eventually unshakable.
디자인의 최슈하게 돈이기 듬바기그리스 제산 최슈는 돈이 듬바기에도 최슈야도 랑게 퇴고라 퇴베게 돈다 삼다데 되는 연대되게 신용으로 봐 제산다 당보 코로나에 대바 코로나면은 안젤이야 안지 디자인의 최슈하게 돈이 듬바기가 말해 듬바마게나 최슈고 말해지 마슈바이나 아니 랑게 신야요 말아 봐서 제산 되는사 자와 대바 장과 장세 자와세 연대 담지기 중에 시 자와데 Lama dela nanti deba re sashi, denza deba jangu re sashi.
You see the outline, the root training in faith. So why is faith the root? Well, faith in the Lama is considered the root of all excellent qualities because through generating faith, by reflecting on his varying good qualities, then one develops, a synonym for faith, a deep trust or confidence in one's Lama. So if one has stable faith in one's Lama, one has stable trust or confidence in one's Lama. And if one has stable trust and confidence in one's Lama, and again I use those as synonyms for faith, when one's Lama gives teachings, one will be open and receptive to those teachings, seeing them as personal advice for oneself. And one will, in addition to that, apply oneself to accomplishing those teachings. And in this way, all good qualities will arise. If one lacks faith, one's mind is not going to be as open and receptive. One is going to engage with the teachings in a very different way. And thereby, those same words will have a marked less impact on one if one lacks faith. But if one's mind is open and receptive due to faith, those same teachings will have a profound impact.
Andine gedin Jesu tende kubakiwa sida da jene za gedin Jesu temba se lamege da sosuge lame debaje lamazin chue da dombo shuba da wang shuba ka shuba na dene shuba na delia ane gedin chembore sembe sosu gedin Jesu tengo reje jeza da ngala denegi lamege zewi wangi ngala ya du chue so ngi denegi nyamlenje xingba de be lamati gedin sembe denegi ngi samloya denegi chue samnana gewa geedi gewa nyamlenje rawadi lamege de jeza lamege denegi gewa nyamlenje bala denegi gewa chimaine ya digiruya na dunga nyomogo yagi denegi antarbada temje kimbo ba toya ta yen roadi desu lamege de sembe lama be mas gedin chimboresha yin sembe lama de gedin jesu tendu den lama de gubai gushep ligorowa jina lama la gedin jesu tembe jen lama la gushep 90개 월 삼라베 야고레스 라마를 구바다 아니 90개 삼로 구바디 개월에서 되네 장고레서지 그린 지수 전반에 90개 그래 그린 지수 말에 바이나 라마제 쉬쉬서서 지금 롭장 야다 신도 어떤가나 지금 라마디게 그린 지수 말에 바이나 라마들이야 차도게다 됐어 젠두르제게 인가 용으로 와지상 가게게 되네 용으로 와지상다 라마야 그린 지수 되네 라마를 구베게 바이나 아니 지게 가게메 개바다 Lamaya Tensim Mikeva, Naya Mikeva, and this is Jungura, Naya than Tensim Kena Divarua, Tizan Desugi, Sosugi Lobjan Yagetoala, and the Mobile Toala, Nugorua, Tizan Diso Maribare, Tizan Naya dan, and Tensim Ked, you Moelo dire, Tizan di Paka or di Gayalia, and Lame getting Chisuti, Lamalu Kubaki Ores, the Nigu Kubaki, Jevena, Sosugi Yamle de Yageturi, says Tizan Dinigi, Sungorua.
The second outline in this section, the way to rely on thought, is remembering his kindness so as to generate respect. The way a Lama shows kindness is through enabling us to cultivate the Dharma within ourselves. This is done through teaching, bestowing of vows, bestowing of initiations, and so forth. So, to generate an appreciation for the kindness of the teacher, one needs to recognize one's great good fortune in being under his care, receiving his guidance, recognizing that due to all the hardship and endeavor that our teacher has gone through, he is able now to skillfully guide me to transform my mind, to accumulate virtue, and thereby to progress towards enlightenment. Here, through recognizing our great good fortune, that through our relationship with our teacher, through his kindness and care towards us, we are progressing to happier states of mind, to suffering ever less. So in this way, we generate a respect for his good qualities. If we lack respect, we are likely to have a disrespectful attitude, which would be expressed as competitiveness or jealousy, or through seeing his good qualities as faults. So here, through reflecting on our great good fortune, we will appreciate him, cherish him, and see his interactions towards us as being an expression of his tremendous care and kindness, and that will lead to deep respect arising within us.
Zawa deba cha lamegi da rang ya tinchi ba kitin chi su chan de gu ba ji du she de sem do chang ba yin da nga zu shi ne da lama de ya su su le kitin chi ba cha de gu ba chi za rang ge ngi bi lama se ngo su lama da su che shu lama ngo su lama ro de lama ge lama de nga zu ngi bi lama se ro chi za ngo ge lama de ngi bi lama je san da rang ye lama de kitin chi bo yin ba de Lama di dela lapken di changi gen dia that getting chimbo chaderwa. Do sin ma ji some da do chid and dinner di lama shasan getting chimbo. Then ya ji dan kasore padan dawa daba lube san ye gyada and the papa tome da kumbu ludu la soba be getting chimbo. Konzugi dinigi jig pa jador jeji pa mena yuba sodu and dinner ma ji konzu jade do sin de nji demba san ye jumden dia. Jianshu Senpa Nyewe Se Ye Xiada, Bendigo Ko Chana Do Jela So Koronzuki, Jige Gaduwa Boda, Disupa, Gungawa, Dene Shiri Boda, Konzuida, Getting Chimbores. To some Konzuki do Chine, Mena San Ye Chedi, that the Padu Hagamaranga Score. She's not this Dusin, Dennis Soya, Zawa Demba San Yumne, the somebody. She's a son, Demba Shannon digging on the Soji. Jumba Jemdin digging, Anzu Dundalia, Gao Baume Bazi, the Nesangin, Tenganzu do Chu, Nanzu Dundalaba, Sung, the Nesumba de Lamadma, Jirimba, Chinduka Yamlanang, the labor de Sosu Lama Bad, Sosolo, Sunga Lama Bado, Dusina, the next hour, the Denisun, Bemas getting Chimboda, the Nigi, that the Nig Kokabra, the Lama Tisuki Kitty, Simba sometimes Dushi, the getting Jedu, the Nia Sosuki Lama, Jubi Lama, the Nigi, Banduchu La Sobata. And the Nege, Wege Lama, Jerumucha La Soba, the Nege Risumachi Lama Namda, and Lozawata, and Dushine, and 제 변도 주된 되는 타투나 demba상이 전 자위게다 맞아 dembe게 가서 최게 자와 중고 demba상이 좀 된들이야 미세게 아들이야 즉시 오지래도 선비 대비게 와야 돼 지게 도시네 대비게다 개된침벌에 선비게다 삼로디 그 도시네 장이 지나가 레투고 리고로와 되는 인자
When cultivating these 2 points, both that of faith as well as recalling kindness, we do so firstly in relation to our direct lamas. So those teachers that we directly receive teachings from, we develop this attitude of faith and recollection of kindness towards our direct teachers. Thereafter, we generate respect for the lineage lamas, the direct lamas, and thereafter the lineage lamas. Here, this unbroken stream of continuity of realized beings who have kept, through their endeavors, the teachings alive and vibrant in our world, enabling us now, in this day and age, to be able to meet the teachings and develop the good qualities of the Dharma within. Here one can reflect right back to Buddha Shakyamuni, our founder teacher, and all those other great masters at the time, such as Ananda, as well as Buddha Shakyamuni's other form in Vajradhara. And then think of all the other great masters in ancient India, such as Chandakirti and Bhavaviveka, who kept nourishing and kept the teachings of the Buddha alive. And then with the transmission to the northern snowlands, to Tibet, all the great masters such as Lama Tsongkhapa and many others who invigorated the Dharma in Tibet. And then through to our modern teachers, this entire continuity generates a deep appreciation for their good qualities and their kindness. Because it's through this unbroken lineage that we are able to once again meet the Dharma and cultivate the minds of the Dharma within us.
데니기 도시네 아주게 삼나다이도 진익 차상을야 지 구백구백에 당 대바게 게딘슈스 템바디 레투야지 용거와 지상 아주 도시네 아주 디날이야 도시 아주 직년시시야 고고라바 삼다베네 네 나무 라메시다 안수브르미지 konzugi 최소 된마페 최소주 되내기 전에 안디제 발레 되는 아주래 직 되내기 녀시지야지 개와사야 다냠리지야 고갑지라고로 되는 차상기 도시는 다디가 도시 삼다도시는 삼다다 나주데 나주 되내야 집에나 디링아도 되 최인시지야 고고라디 가선 최소 디기 전에 아주랴 안주 알이나 셰야르니 크로즈냐는 아주 녀시지야 고갑디 개와디 두비야게 개와디라고로 디 저들의 가와 간데스 용어에서는 네 서버미체 안디 라메시 도시네 코로나적이 투메디 잘 지공부신도 수발네 델레 용거와 안디 간데스 용어에서는 다 코로나적 라마 아니 야오르미체라서 봐 도시네 가와 용어에서는 아니 베게 라마 제르미체라서 봐다 사예게 유리스미체 라마 남게 대속에 냠네 제의 그 림바를 갈래서는 안 날렌데게 라마 지게 대속에 캐바디 대수게 내는데 캐바디기 가는 것은 되네 사유 손셰베가 두어보 안지게 군가와라서 봐데 되네 코로나지가 두발에 되네 안죄 두신냠 지시야 대수 가는 것은 덤바상 요즘네데 자유 투사 송여데 덤바상 요즘 송바레스 대다 덤바상 요즘네데 두신에 빼다 나들야 자위기 최송자 상요즘네데 다 자와 투사 상 덤바상 요즘네데 제자당 안지게 두신에 상요즘네데서 미더와스 빼베시 게딘치모리 세베당 안지게 제바원이라 안다 예 디레 세비타 구셰께다 다디야 안두신 삼다이도 다 덤바상 요즘데 최송에다 안주들야 안주 두마세야다 둥아 디기 두비에 된다라 아주 송바레 대양 안상에 주면 디 안주게 된다라 까와 망부 제바레스 디제바데야 가르스는 자와 닝질라라래 바레스 다 닝질이야 심지어 담주 둥아다 자고도 세베 심지어 아주 잠바단 자와 기에제 니 된다라 둥아다 자야 된다라 안냠는 제제 안에 상요고바 톱는 최송바레 제다다 잠바단 제외 냠는 세데 배 마시게 니베 첨부 슈시도와 sembi게 두 삼다 고라실이나 nganzuki dunu jaya digba de koraja ya de sanye jumne de bardu tu ko zawa tuse de ta ningje jamba da je ningji 첨보 ningje tela tu te ta ningje se de jamje samlo se de keba도 포와 시오지 뉴바 첨부 제도 와선 비게다 잠지기 이체 뉴바디 연대디게 야보 통투야 지사 두신에다 제자 디네에서 간주 다디디 가왈에서 간주 다디디 잠니지 냠는 지역이 림바들 봐 장고로 두스는 꼬라 접시 딜레 가서 자기도
to reflect on the good qualities and thereby the benefits that we have received through their care and kindness brings great benefits to one. So one thinks about one's direct teachers, but then one should go back through their lineage, both those that are directly associated with our own spiritual teachers and those perhaps a little more indirectly. So in our own situation here, we certainly should recall the great kindness of Lama Zopa and Lama Yeshe, because it's through their remarkable qualities and their endeavors over lifetimes that we can gather in this Dharma center. And all the other Dharma centers in our organization only can exist because of their good qualities and their endeavors over lifetimes. And moreover, when we think about dependency, their good qualities came about independent on their own endeavors, but also their relationships with their remarkable teachers. And through the endeavors of their remarkable teachers and the kindness and care with which they held Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa closely, guided them in their development, who then later were able to establish our dharmas, our organizations and so forth. We see then this connection going back beyond this lifetime to previous lifetimes, and that connection will continue throughout the stream of realized masters in Tibet, all of whom, through interdependency, kept the Dharma alive and vibrant. And the Dharma that flourished so in ancient Tibet came from those remarkable lamas in ancient India, the Pandits from Nalanda. Through their growth and development over centuries, through their excellent qualities, they kept the Dharma alive and vibrant in ancient India and later could spread far and wide, such as the snowy lands of Tibet. And that ancient Nalanda could be as successful as it was, came about in dependence on the prior Indian masters. And there we can trace right back to Buddha Shakyamuni, our founder teacher himself. So through thinking of the remarkable qualities of the lineage lamas and their tremendous kindness that they have shown all beings, a deep and sincere respect for their qualities will arise within us. And when we think about their qualities, there are so many to think of, but in particular one can focus on love and compassion, because it's through their love and compassion that held each and every suffering mother being, including ourselves, that they strove so hard to attain the enlightened state and continued to teach and keep the teachings alive and vibrant in the world. So it's through their love and compassion, through the love and compassion of these individual remarkable beings, that the Dharma has stayed alive and vibrant for all these centuries, through to the present day. So it's really love and compassion that has guided generation after generation of practitioner to develop those good qualities within them and share them fully and completely with others. So here we can recognize that in fact love and compassion is the guide that has brought us to where we are now.
Bendigo azu dusine samda de jige lamegi yenden de da dusine jige samda da hwa jige nyamlen na da nyama lobjong je da dusine gom japna de denege tu se chik cheva de du che pha de du she be ne da chi du she lama yo so so ba den ya chi sang yu chim den de ba du she ne de de je da tang chi so so ya onera chi de ba ki ya re da de ke din che ba da nga de denege chi che shu ya ko ra de ma se ke din chi mo re sha sem be ga sam da da denege sam da de de ba ki ya re dene gushep ki ya de ke din che so de gushep ki ya de yung go ba dene za da nga du she ne samlo 당고야 돼 지기 김제 삼다데 예침부인 서와 진짜 디네 자다 저기 가르스네 네电信 자와 중화 세电信 자와 중화 두신나 아주 최님네 저 고업대 진마 디네 규규마 지기지기레 된 마 다데 버두시 지기지기레电제 마용돼 바르마도 지기 마된 바지 빨아대 최소만은 사사로 요마르와 메르와 저 무티네 균마 제버지 지기지기마电제 마 유티 정하서 데리요도 냠내지 진짜电대하네 균나 소시 상고도 하되 빼지 균망보제 나소를 창제 저 균망보 초발에 되는 주번마도 진짜 강라에 맞된 바데 술에 맞된 윤된 자야지 민도와 진짜 되네서電비기 두시電되게 남자들이 파 직직이 되는 아주 자아데 딜에 되는 연구도 디된 바데 딜에 되는 연구도 디네 딜에 다 자와 상해 좀 된들 투도와 최대 냠내제 다 상해 좀 되게 최소야 돼 심정이 된다라 동아자야다 인지기 맞으베 이 잠니지를 투도와 세비 두시 삼다에도 아니 지게 라마 차산이야 랑기 Lama, ngoi lama dan gyubi lama dine sangye chumne de pardo tupike lama yonsu sobale ya manjuge anjige guba gushep ge dan geden chisu che dan an deba ge de yo de an lawado an je za jamni je sebe samlo de shi o je keba de pabare do je za jamni je di gombi ge tela dene an sanjugo ba toyege samage dene jugon bale dene an sanjugo ba top dene sanjuge chöson dene chi da zawa tuse de chasan jamni jele dene yon de chagdo asambe tu samdai de azu dene ge samdai na dene ge lama yonsu zo bale ya ane guba ge ya dan deba ge ya re anje an jamni je samlo de be masewida niba chembo da pando chembo shu jin ba de maza hago tuyege dosi yongwe sarwa chazadine zanga du chene 근데 연대한테다 되게 장 삼두 장세도 삼다들와 당고에 되게 예침을 책에서 김제 삼다된 세대.
In this meditation, we reflect on the many excellent qualities of our lamas, our direct lamas, as well as this entirety of the lineage that, in dependence upon whom we have been able to once again encounter the Buddha Dharma and once again come under the direct care of our teachers. Thinking like this is so important because it brings us to the point where we become open and receptive to his guidance, as we saw in former chapters, taking the teachings as direct advice to ourselves. So here, we need to think, reflect based on reasons, recalling the interdependence from our direct teachers to their direct teachers to their direct teachers. And we see this deep process of interdependence. But whilst this can be related to in a straight line as linear, we should also understand that it is broader than that. For all of these great beings to develop their qualities was dependent on so many other great beings around them, influencing, helping, assisting in keeping the Dharma alive and vibrant. So we relate to the lineage, not as a strict straight line, but the broadness of the many great lamas in the world now, and the previous generation and generation prior to that, right the way back throughout the centuries in Tibet, throughout the centuries in India, to our founder teacher, Buddha Shakyamuni. So there we think of dependent arising, particularly the expression of interdependence, of the wide variety of causes that were required for the spiritual development of beings over these many centuries. All these causes that were required for us to be in the position where we are right now. And in particular, amongst many of these causes, is the cultivation of love and compassion by so many beings, those who are our direct teachers and the entirety of the lineage lamas, as well as all those around them who helped to sustain the Dharma through difficult circumstances over many, many centuries. So thinking like this generates a deep reverence, a deep respect for our direct lamas and the lineage lamas, with sincere appreciation of their endeavors, which we know they made so as to benefit beings just like ourselves. And this deep respect then, this deep appreciation of their kindness that comes about on a basis of faith, serves to make us both open and receptive to the teachings, but also to strive to apply them to our mind, seeing the preciousness of this opportunity that we have attained. And in particular here, recognizing the role that love and compassion has played throughout these centuries, ensuring thereby that the Dharma is still present and we can still encounter it, we come to value the good qualities of love and compassion. And seeing their good qualities now more clearly, we strive to develop love and strive to develop compassion within us. So in this way, we come to reflect how through developing a reliance on our teacher, we start to develop the qualities of the Dharma more broadly within us.
And I don't know that Yarum Chiki Kitchen said that Yarum Chiki and checking us some big that some of the young cigarua that it in became there Karelana that Yarum J. The Yanan Ma Janagi, Pe, Zenson J. de Kabla, and Yarum Chida, and Jahama Pewa, the Pevadi, Yarum Chisundua, being a Jahana Yongwedi, and then Be Rawan Chibu Dunda Mais, Tisnan and Zinyon Pe. The Yakuchua the Dunda Insudaj, Be and Rawan Rai Dunda, Red, and so Chugging Yamlin the Yakuya. When my idea, Rawan Rai Chigu Dunda Mains, then Chuggy, then Chug Sung of Jack today in soul, that's all it's Chuggy Sung. She said, the names are Yarum Che, when my Jahala Petu Mena. Yasan Pashilayo Mare, Yamlenche again to do not share Rayo Mare. Yarn in Mali do Yama Yahar killing bully to get Baba Yama and Yahar Missy Chadu Mangudua. Cesar Bue Yanagi, Gemige Senson Jerry Labiodum, Dine Di Missigi Pasti, like Yarashung to do the Yataya de Conso. Yama Nelly to get Yahar Nalu, the killing bully in Baba Yorwa. Konzo Yahagi Lake Yorwa. Chesnada Janagi, Bue Senson Jevare, Laviodu, Yahashungi, Lake Sudubare, Sulembareda. Kola Bulia Lota Ereda, Kozo Bebetike. Chesna Jarum Jim Mapena, Koz Lota Ere. Chesnada Jarum Jim Yenima Jushu Page in the Yini Yagasan, some Lesha, going to Yagashungi Yanja part, the Devales was. It's not that Jagashun pen, that Jarumjik Bill Pem, Jagal Pemena, Beva Mongoli to Mara, Leo Tuba in Nayam, and the Sosona Doverization, Ruth Mato, and the Dinigi, go up the Rayomar. Chesa Jarumji pay on the Lamsa, Jagana pay on the Kablia, and the Lobra said, and the Bui Lobra said, Lobra Losuku, scarcing out the Bui Labra Labus. Chesa Jagal Labdana died Yoruba. In a day, none of the Bui Sunkup J. 2 men, the Cheda region, Sunka J. 2 men, Bebalia, Labra Losuku, yes, and Nero Shusha, and Nero game, Labra, Bebalia, Labra Losu, and Bebarangle, Labra Zuyada, and two send the dinner, Jig Yarm Jiggy, and the dance car, and Jig Jasan, Pa Zuyada, two Chen Zuchen, and Jig Najene. That Yasa, and Jiggy. Be must that Jig Dasum tribute to the Risuma Chepalia, Chasa, Jig Yahu Chadu, Chadu, this Chasa, and me, Yarum Chedus Pe, and Yarum Chigi Kalapa, and Jig Jawajin, and Jimmy Chigi Tony, Rocker, Yombi, Rocker J, and Lucine, and Jig Big, Labra, Zuyada, and Jig Chulu Risuma Chepe, Conde Zuyada, and then and then Yarum Chigi. Yaman Burlia, Tingy Labra, Lobsang Dorje, and there's some that Tishulumba La Sobata, Denigi, and Sheda, Che, Nushemado, Chikum Manshal, Chishabdo, Denishmada Mero, Mindua, Chisanta, not Yarum Chidu, in my Combati Yagetu, then Pa, Chilopjon, the Chikpa, Galop Mambo, and Jibulia, Lojo Debamani, then two Combati Susa. Tenegally in the Yarum Chikas and the Combo Rusumachi, Chedi Rusumachibalia, and Jig, Shin Lopjon, and Sini the Zoo, where said so. Now do so. Then the margin and Yarum Chigli, and the Jig. Nima Berlin, Anetiquette, Mero, that Anelia Tinta was. Then Anelia Gishimata, so was a Duchin, that Gishimata, so Duchin, and that Bendigo Lobsang Chabigi, Ginchine, Dansicata, Bene, Chugurusuma Chibanalia, Lobsang Jedine, which in Digi that Gishita, Kembota, Lama Mango, Page, and then Chia Kalia, Kazakal Pichoso, Delia, Chick, Chishe, Duchin, Jedi. The new joined that's how Yarum to get a chatter. She's not the Yarum Chedi, Denigi Conversiche, Yarma Pemevena, this Shire or Merwa. She's a dinner, Yarum Ched, must say getting Chimbo, Bergi, Rishung, Dan, the dinner, Nangpe Ched, must say Darkia Chimbo, and the chick Yama Nashi, Burlio, and Nashin, Chiki Chatu, Yarum to get it. She's a dinner, Yarum Ched, must say Bigida, Antulia. Getting Chimbushu, Chadu, I didn't say Dushin some Davena, Nejam getting the Hago to the Gentua Chagua. The Nigi, some Gamadana, Chick, Yaram Chickett, other Chichi, Laming, and the Lamige, Remata, Yaram Jet, getting Chimbuscamara, some Sunday, Jensigua, and the Yonsigua. She's a douche Choyone, Gachesan do to some Davena, Tachasan. Yarmchi to get it. And the Asada on it and Yarmchi, no, Tajik, the Asada and the Chavos, which is new, which is a Yarmchi, my own one secret 20. She's not saying, said the Injimich Anajabi Diamares, could church, magic issue, Mijana, Janku, yes, and then I love the Halia. She did that saying that bird, why not the water Mijana, saying Pidge, what I'm most would do, bed does Chimbure. Yawacha, Belabra Hada, Dunigi, then Dinigi, Yawacha, the Dini and Zada, there's an Chu, the combatants, and it is on Rusu Machipalia, Seni Lobjon de Mena, that Pache got to Mediva Sochi, Chasan, Seni Lobju, Dimazin, that Labra Hare, Nanchu, just not Yarum Chigi. Injimiji, to get 10 years of Lobjon, China, the Injimiji, Nangbi Church by Chevajinko, Mother, the Lobsendi, Nangbi Churtilla, and to get seeing descended Chanchuguris in it. Chesa did Nangchele made in Bigida, Dusine, and the Jig Lobjon said, Dusine, Yaharaki, Labra, Diliduan, Labra, Pajipu, Labra Mambonal, Timongbodan, and the Jig that the Gomjada, the Sulapchen, the Jigdua, the Pandoya, who should do support to get the Jigdua or the Ganifat, Bear, or Pando Yungu say Shigdua. Then that is Chazan, Yarum Chigi, to get in Chaderoa. The near some time when the Yarum Chidone, Rane, getting Chimbo, the New Indian, and the Jikusi Rindu, near where she were the Yachimbo Shura check to how Jig did some time Mudua. Kusi Rinbu.
When talking about the kindness of the teacher, both direct and lineage lamas, His Holiness will come to mind. So people may well wonder, why is it in the world of Tibetan Buddhism, His Holiness is seen as the foremost teacher, his kindness as being the greatest? So here it's good to understand, because on the one hand, it could just be thought to be, well, this is a cultural thing, this is culturally what is done. But that is a very weak foundation. Using one's knowledge, one's wisdom, this, and thereby reasoning, brings about a stable and powerful recognition of the qualities of His Holiness. So why is it that His Holiness is held in such remarkable esteem? Well, if His Holiness had not gone into exile when the invasion of Tibet was successful and completed, if he had stayed in Tibet, our world would have been very different. the very fact of him going into exile ensured that the Indian government accepted Tibetan exiles to come. If His Holiness had not gone into exile, what is much more likely to have happened would be both that regular Tibetans would not have been allowed, the border would have been closed, and those Tibetans who had already settled in areas such as Kalimpong and who had citizenship, that they would have been sent back to Tibet. That is much more likely. But because His Holiness came and had already an established relationship with Nehru, he was able to easily get permission to establish a community in exile, a community of whatever size, as many as those would come into exile, they would be granted refugee status. And moreover, His Holiness was able, with ease, to get Nehru to agree that Tibetans were not to assimilate into Indian society, but could retain and cultivate their own identity, or retain and re-establish their own identity. And thereby, they immediately could set about re-establishing the places of education, which were, back then, just the monasteries, as well as the nunneries. But quickly thereafter, also schools for the children. All this could only happen because His Holiness came into exile, and because of His Holiness's qualities, that he had the required relationships with people such as the Prime Minister of India. And thereby, if His Holiness had stayed in Tibet and not gone into exile, Tibetans could not have fled persecution, and moreover, the Chinese destruction of Tibetan Buddhism would still have been completed, and Tibetan Buddhism would have disappeared from the world. But because His Holiness came into exile, thereby in allowing so many refugees to follow after him, the places of education, both old, the monasteries and nunneries, as well as new schools for the non-ordained, these could all be established. And they were established in a way that in some aspects were superior to how they abided, or how they were in ancient Tibet, in old Tibet, in that His Holiness, through insistence, repeatedly over a sustained period, insisting that all four traditions should engage in study of the Dharma, as well as not just a mere acquiring of knowledge, but an integration of that through a debate. All four traditions now, and for decades, have engaged in deep and broad in terms of all the ordained have the opportunity to study and study deeply. And also through His Holiness's insistence, for the first time, the nuns were given an education. And in about the last decade, the first Geshe-mas graduated. So this is all new, and all came about in dependence on the kindness of His Holiness. And moreover, the Tibetan schools and university, these two all included Dharma studies for their students. So now the younger generation are well educated in the Dharma. They don't just merely learn the Dharma, they investigate the Dharma through engaging in debate as well. And His Holiness has said very clearly, in order to gain the benefits of the Dharma, to cultivate it in one's mind, you do not have to ordain. You do not have to enter the monasteries or the nunneries. You can, in other forms of education, your schools and university, there study the Dharma. And he's encouraged thereby the entirety of the Tibetan community to study the Dharma. And through this process, not only has the Tibetan community flourished in exile, not only has Tibetan Buddhism survived, but it has spread throughout our world. None of that would have happened if His Holiness hadn't come into exile, and if His Holiness lacked the qualities that he has. And it's therefore due to His Holiness that in far-flung parts of the world, such as Australia, Tibetan Dharma is present and accessible. So therefore, it's due to the kindness of His Holiness that all of this has been achieved in the decades since exile. And moreover, the benefits of meditation are now becoming ever more widely known in the world, and part of that dependency is through the efforts of His Holiness, and therefore certainly in Indian schools, through the efforts of His Holiness, meditation and Buddhism is now more widely being taught, as well as in some schools more broadly in the world. So here we can come to recognize the incredible impact that His Holiness has had on our world, and therefore we can easily generate respect for his qualities and see the kindness and the care and the benefits that beings receive due to him. So this is also good to understand, not just to generate faith in His Holiness, but gives one a deeper appreciation why long life pujas are regularly held for His Holiness, because of his unique qualities and his unique contribution to the general happiness and well-being of our world. Well, thank you. Then we can conclude there for this morning. Thank you.